be to God. All right, so just a quick little reminder that the book of Isaiah ranges around about 200 years long, and it's divided into three sections: First Isaiah, Second Isaiah, and Third Isaiah. We are in First Isaiah, and each of the sections, each of the prophecies to those times had a distinct context, circumstances. They had unique audiences, and they had a message. So for those of us who like to line things up in a linear fashion, we're going to be bouncing around between Third Isaiah and First Isaiah, and then we go to Second Isaiah, then we go back to First Isaiah, then we go to Third Isaiah. But if we keep the context and the theme in our heads, we'll be able to hear the relevant message that comes to us as we look at Isaiah's words. So today we hear in the first section, First Isaiah speaks in a time when there's a combined force between the Syrians and the northern kingdom, and they are invading the southern kingdom. And later then it's the Assyrians that are invading the southern kingdom. And we're told by the prophet that he counseled the king to trust the Lord rather than in military might. And so the repeated theme in this first Isaiah is to trust God, but also as they were advised to trust God, they were also reminded that their lack of faith will cause consequences. So what we hear is words that point toward the day of God's judgment and the day of salvation. So there will be joy because of the promise. And even though God will judge them guilty, there will still be joy because God promises salvation. God is trustworthy. So this Isaiah 12 sings of a day when peace will finally be established upon the earth, and the nations of the world will wage war no more. It's a beautiful, beautiful vision. Last week we had a grand and glorious vision. Today we have a beautiful vision given to Israel's leaders and ancestors. And it would be God's gift to them that would enable them not merely just to survive as a people, but to thrive as God's people. So in a real sense, what we've come to realize is that when Jerusalem is restored, the world will be restored. And when liberation to Israel from captivity and exile happens, the liberation of the whole world will also occur. Israel is not the only one that hears the good news. God desires all people, even those who are enemies of Israel, to join in the coming day when the God of peace and mercy and justice will be served. And it extends all the way out to the animal kingdom as well. So Isaiah's prophecy calls us to give thanks. I will give thanks to you, O Lord. I give thanks to the Lord and call upon his name. So it's fitting that as we prepare for the big feast on Thanksgiving, that we enter it with thankful hearts. And the Hebrew root word for thanksgiving is yada, which means to throw out your hands. It signifies outstretched arms. And thankfulness for the Hebrews really was a reminder of what God has done, and what the deeds to remember are what? The giving of the law to deliver the people out of slavery, God's generosity giving them a land, God's provision of a harvest each year. We give thanks to God for the really big things, the obvious, but Scripture teaches us to give God thanks for even the simplest things, like an apple. In the Greek, thanks and thanksgiving is often understood as gratitude. And the caveat here is that it's always active gratitude. Thankfulness, gratitude keeps one focused on God. So I do like Thanksgiving. I love the food. The one day I love my family, friends, and fellowship as we gather around the table. I love the conversation. I love the good wine we sip on. I love the lazy day after and the leftovers. It is the only day of the year that I can eat a turkey sandwich on white bread and mayonnaise for breakfast. I just love Thanksgiving. But I just can't help myself because I think I got the spirit this morning. Why did they let the turkey join the band? That's exactly because he had his own drumsticks. What do you call a running turkey? Fast food. What did the mother turkey say to her disobedient children? If your father could see you now, he'd turn over in his gravy. It took me hours to think of these things. All right, my favorite one. Why did the cranberries turn red? Because they saw the turkey dressing. Okay, all kidding aside, we need to nurture this sense of thanksgiving. We need to nurture habits of giving thanks more today than really ever. Look at our media-saturated culture telling us over and over and over and over that we don't have enough. The advertisements blare at us continually, telling us that we need more things, we need more recreational activities. The theme here is more and more and more, and that's the message that we get every day. And that leads us away from gratitude. Because the more stuff one has, the less grateful one becomes. And I say that because the more one has, the more one wants. I read a story about two friends who met on a street one day, and one of them looked miserable. I mean, almost on the verge of tears. His friend asked, "Well, what has the world done to you, my friend?" And the sad fellow said, "Let me tell you, 3 weeks ago my uncle died and left me $40,000. Well, his friend said, that's a lot of money. The sad man said, "But you see, 2 weeks ago a cousin I never knew died and left me $85,000, free and clear." So his friend said, "It sounds to me like you've been very blessed." And the sad one said, interrupted, he said, "You just don't understand. Last week my great aunt passed away and I inherited $250,000 from her." Now the man's friend was really confused. "Why is it then that you look so sad?" And the man replied, "This week, nothing." Let me say this again. I believe that we need to nurture habits of thankfulness more today than ever. The more stuff, the less grateful. The more we have, the more we want. Henry Nouwen once wrote, "Increasing prosperity has not made people friendlier toward one another. They're better off, but that newfound wealth has not resulted in a new sense of community." He writes, "I get the impression that people are more preoccupied with themselves than when they didn't possess so much. There is less opportunity to relax, to get together informally, to enjoy the little things of life. Success has isolated a lot of people and made them lonely. The higher up you get on the ladder of prosperity, the harder it becomes to be together, to sing together, to pray together, and to celebrate together the spirit of giving thanksgiving." So we need to nurture habits of giving thanks, of being grateful for the many blessings that we have. On the way home, a little girl, oh, geez, man, we're going to be here a while. On the way home, a little girl said to her mother, the preacher's sermon confused me this morning. And the mother asked, well, why is that? And the girl replied, well, he said that God is bigger than we are. Is that true? And the mother replied, yes, that's true. And the little girl said, he also said that God lives within us. Is that true? And again, the mother replied, yes. The little girl said, well, if God is bigger than us and God lives in us, wouldn't God show through? Giving thanks matters. It shows who lives in us, and by being thankful people, we demonstrate that we don't take our gifts for granted. Being thankful also bears witness to us not taking granted to the one who gives the gifts. I think God asks us to give thanks so that we might experience the blessing that gratitude brings. Giving gratitude brings God back into sight. And Isaiah's vision reminds us that being people who gives thanks is what God really wants from us. It's what God desires of us, because we notice things. We notice more when we live with grateful hearts. And when we give thanks, our lives become richer and more vibrant. And God's goodness gets shared a whole lot more. Even in the midst of the pressure that culture puts on us, I'd simply invite you to notice what you do have and who is in your life. Because God generously gives us much. So my invitation is to encourage you to be very intentional to notice God's gift for you, for us as God's beloved community. Choose to notice God's abundant blessings and remember that your relationship with God has greater value than all the stuff. When Mrs. Klein told her first graders to draw a picture of something for which they were thankful, she thought how these little first graders who lived in a deteriorating neighborhood, who would be able to, what would they paint or draw? Would it be just simply what's typical, the pictures of a turkey or pilgrims or a Thanksgiving meal? But what Mrs. Klein noticed and was taken aback was one picture from a student named Douglas who was sad and he was the one that was a little clingy, and every time they went out for recess, he would cling to her. And his picture was simply of a hand. But whose hand did he draw? And the class got captivated by his image, and one said, I think it's the hand of God who brings us food. One student said, it's a farmer who grows turkeys. One little one said, it's more like a police officer who protects us. And Katie said, I suppose it's to be all the hands that help us, but Douglas could only draw one of them. Well, as the day progressed, Mrs. Klein almost forgot Douglas and the pleasure the class had in conversation. And so when she went off to do some other work for the class, she bent over and asked Douglas, well, whose hand did you draw? And Douglas mumbled, it's yours, teacher. And then Mrs. Klein recalled that she had taken Douglas by the hand from time to time throughout the year, as she did with many of the other children as well. And taking them by the hand should not have meant so much, but it's what Douglas gave thanks for. Giving thanks matters, even if it's just holding hands. So let this week be filled with gratitude, and be nurtured. Nurture each other in ways for us to be more grateful